So I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd say probably 50% of the time. That's actually probably pretty generous. I'd say probably like 70, 80% of the time throughout my life I feel like I've just sort of been winging it. But I feel like there's also these pressures, internally and externally where I feel like in all aspects of our lives there's this sort of need to feel like you have it all together, like 100% of the time. So I'm in school right now. I'm in grad school and I'm studying systems engineering, and I'm just winging it here. Oftentimes a lot of the subject matters in the beginning are so far over my head. I am well out of my depth with all these different classes. And I was I was an advertising major in my undergrad, which was also 5 years ago. I haven't been in school for 5 years, and the last time was in advertising, which is an offset of business and communications. There's not too much of a correlation there with engineering. I don't know how I got into this program at all, but I'm here. I will say that I did get really good at sort of playing the system of school. If you think about it, if you really look at school, high school, college mostly, it's there is a system, and I'm not sure if you heard that. There was a bus horn outside, but there's a system and there's rules, and if you sort of just look at it and learn them, you can play them pretty easily. It's gotten even easier now. Sort of AI and ChatGPT wasn't really that prevalent or that huge in use during my undergrad, but now it's even easier if you just take the time and learn it and then apply it. I think you can do really, really well sort of on paper. There is a difference between doing well in class, for example, and then actually knowing whatever it is that you're being taught. But on paper, if you learn the rules, you apply it, you can do really, really well. And I'm sure that kind of helped, I suppose, but just understanding how it works. And the same goes for jobs and interviews too. There's definitely a sort of a template that you can follow, and sort of rules, unspoken rules that if you follow them, then you can do really, really well. And outside of, I guess, school, which has sort of been my main focus recently, I feel very much like a beginner in my new job. It's completely different. It's a completely different part of my industry than my previous job. Now, I work in aviation, and there's so many different offsets of aviation, or I suppose within the industry. And this is well out of my league as far as what I was used to. In my last job, though, I was good. I was there for a little over 2 years, so I better have been good. But sometimes I miss being good. Like the feeling of being useful. And it doesn't really matter if you like your job or not, but there's a certain feeling that you get from being sort of that person. If you are that guy that knows every facet, every aspect of your job, and people come to you for advice, or you can help people out, it's a good feeling, and I realized though that also in my last job when I first started it, I knew absolutely nothing about it. It was also my first job in aviation, so I didn't even know the industry at all. So I guess I just have to start looking at this new job like that. While I do miss being in a role where I feel actually useful, that it'll come in time just the more you do it. And whenever you start something new, I think you're going to fail time and time again. You're going to make mistakes. That's just sort of how you learn. You won't really learn from if you get everything right the first time, then you're not going to really retain it as much because, it's easy just as this. But then if something happens, if there's like a new variable that gets thrown in, then everything goes to hell. You won't know how to handle that. So I think with failure, you sort of learn it more, I guess, holistically in a way, if that's the right word for it. But no matter what, you're going to fail. That's just part of it. Like, when I was younger, I loved skating. I skated every single day after school with friends, weekends, summers. It was just filled with skating. I'd watch the Yeah Right Girl Skateboards video every single week. And like, I wanted to be Sean Malto. I had this idol, this skating role model, and I'd watch his clips over and over and over again. And when I first started skating, it was like Bambi on ice. I was like a fresh-born, deer, just barely able to stand. I looked goofy. I did not look good on a board at all. But then over time, after all the falling down, all the rolled ankles, and I mean, at that age too, it doesn't really matter too much. When you're like 8 or 9, you can bounce back up pretty easily. You're like putty. You're young, you're malleable. But over time, after all those rolled ankles, after all the injuries, after whatever, by the end of it, I could do everything that I sort of wanted to do. I felt comfortable. I could hit rails, I could tray flip down, small stair sets. It was all fun. It was all that learning process throughout of all the failures, and I suppose that's part of it. But I also think that sort of when you're at that age, when you're 8 or 9, and you're doing all those things, it's a lot easier to pick up on new things, right? There's a lot of opportunities that are sort of offered at a much younger age and sort of as you get older. And I mentioned this in another video, but I know I'm not old compared to everyone older than me, but definitely as you get older, sort of your opportunities, they start to dwindle, and there are so many opportunities that I feel like that I've squandered. And I think it's when you're at an age, especially in high school, I think that a sense of belonging and a sense of feeling, if you have a community around you, it's a good feeling. It's what a lot of people, want to strive for, to be accepted, to, feel good about who you are and in your own skin as you sort of, your confidence is pretty, I think, it's funny, when you're a kid, your confidence is sky high, because, you don't really care. But then you sort of start to become self-aware, right? And you get into your head about everything. You start thinking about, how people look at me, how people are going to react to what I do, and then start questioning everything. And I think you sort of hit this bottom level, and you have to slowly just start building your confidence back up again, like the type of confidence that you had, when you were a kid. But at that age, there are so many opportunities that are being offered to you, and I know from personal experience that I had a lot that I said no to because, I much rather sought after that approval instead, because I wanted that, and I wouldn't know, say if I did this, how they would feel about that, and then maybe I wouldn't be accepted, in the same way. That being said, I've squandered a lot of opportunities, and I'm trying not to do that anymore, because there's going to be less and less over time, at least the opportunities that are only afforded by time, like I've accepted, that I won't go to law school, for example, and I did get pretty far though. I took the LSAT, applied, got accepted, the whole 9. But then I realized that it wasn't for me, and I think that's an important part as well, and sort of exploring your options. There's going to be opportunity, but you have to sort of look at these opportunities and sort of see what it is that you actually want to do, because if you choose one, then you won't have another. But then you also get into, I guess, this mindset of all these different paths, that you could take, but you don't take. And by doing one, you kill one off. But I do think that it is important to find your path through exploring many, many different things. And if you would ask me, what are you going to do in 5 years? Or do I know what I'm going to do in 5 years? No, I don't know. I mean, I have current goals and aspirations, but the thing about the future is that it's fairly unknown. Anything could happen, but that doesn't mean that I don't still try, that I don't still explore. A better term might be like a loose plan. I have a loose plan for the next 5 years. But I guess as you sort of explore these different, directions that you could go down, you could find yourself, in situations or in rooms where you feel like you don't necessarily belong. This can lead to sort of an imposter syndrome, where you fully believe that whatever it is that you're doing, you are not the right person for it. There's probably a better candidate out there to do whatever it is that you're doing. But if you are feeling this way, and this is something that I've had to tell myself time and time again, you are exactly where you are supposed to be in the moment. Where you go from there is up to you. But in the moment, there were a bunch of different factors that led you to that point. But speaking of not feeling like you're in the right room or you don't belong, I'm taking a class this semester. It's an elective, and it's called Quantum Computation. The sole reason that I took it, that I registered for it, was because it sounded interesting. That was the whole thing. It sounded cool. I know absolutely nothing about quantum anything, and computation, it's pretty elementary. So I registered for it, and I'm currently in it. And first off, the prereqs, they said a general familiarity with linear algebra. Cool. The last math class I took was sophomore year, 7 years ago, and it was statistics for non-math majors. That was sort of my math background going into this, right? And the people in this class, I got to meet several of them through discussions. If you're not in school and you haven't been in school yet, or I guess college, be prepared for discussions. It's every week and they're awesome. Everyone loves discussion posts. But in these discussion posts, you get to meet some of the students, right? And these are full-time researchers, like actual people, seasoned electrical engineers, computer science types, software engineering types, the whole slew of them. These people work at private contractors, quantum startups, the whole thing. And then there's me, right? While they were off, exploring all these different, very, very math-heavy subjects, I was making campaigns for Tinder and HBO and Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So I'd say pretty close, pretty neck and neck, but needless to say, the first week of class kicked my ass. It was all complex vectors and linear algebra. This was the type of math that I wasn't necessarily that used to. I haven't seen a real number in years, and now I feel like I'm getting a minor in Greek, and I definitely did not feel like I belonged in the first week. Now it's the third week. Granted, that's still not that much time, and I still do very much feel like a beginner. But there was a learning curve, and I took a crash course on linear algebra, thanks Khan Academy, but I got it. It definitely wasn't easy. It was probably harder than, a lot of the other students in class to do the first assignment. All these different math problems and all these different whatever, imaginary numbers that aren't really imaginary numbers. They're, the next dimension on sort of your vector. Whole bunch of stuff that just right over my head, But it's fine. I did it. and I'm going to continue to do it for the next, 12 or 14 weeks of class. Just have to try a little bit harder. Now, even though I'm not 100% sure if I want to become an engineer, which is definitely not the right attitude or mindset, I think, if you're going to go into a grad program or commit that amount of time to really anything. But I think for me, it's more about the reason. It's not necessarily the exact subject of engineering. I wasn't like, oh, wow, I really want to be an engineer so badly. But I always thought that I could do well in STEM, but I never did. I never really applied myself. At that age where I was choosing sort of my major and what I wanted to do in my undergrad, I was far more concerned with going out with friends, drinking, trying to get laid, whatever 18, 19-year-olds would do. And just the thought of everything that engineers do throughout school wasn't very appealing at all. Studying for 10 hours a day is not very cohesive with what I personally wanted at that time. And I also realized something, I guess sort of fairly recently. I never really had to try, and it's like I was a straight A student. I was on honor roll. I was in the top percentile of my graduating class in high school and in my undergrad. And I'm not saying any of this to sort of brag, I guess, but when it comes to people that don't really have to work all too hard at things during those years, once you face something that you actually don't understand or something that doesn't come naturally, you don't really have that character, I suppose, built up to actually try, or at the very least figure something out. And hard work beats talent every single time. I don't care what you say. If something comes naturally to someone compared to someone who doesn't get it but tries every single waking minute to do that thing, this person is going to come out on top every single time. And then I realized that for myself looking at this, because college was a breeze, it was a cakewalk, at least undergrad was anyway. So when I was presented the opportunity, to expose myself to topics that were completely alien to me, I was quick to take it. And I think that's also why I got into going to the gym or just working out in general over the course of the last couple of years. And it wasn't just, to fill out my shirts more and, get big or anything like that. Although you should see me from several years ago, I was skin and bone. I'd consume maybe like 300 calories a day. And I was skating all the time. So all those calories went out the window. I had a problem with like strong gusts of wind. I was like a plank, a little stick. But I found that with working out, there's no shortcuts. There's no easy way out. Unless you're gonna like shoot up. But I was never really a fan of needles, so that wasn't all too appealing to me. And so I got into it, and I just stuck with it. And in a world with so few constants, at least in my life, there's very few constants, I think. It was definitely a major point of consistency. And it was also, at the end of the day, it very much came down to just me versus me, which I think I needed. I get out what I put into it. And it is 100% hard work in doing things that you might not necessarily want to do all the time. And I've talked about this before, about motivation, but motivation's always going to come and go. It's never going to be consistent. You're going to wake up one day and not feel very motivated to do something. And not being motivated to do something and then doing it anyway, I think that helps build up trust in yourself to keep a promise to yourself, or make that promise then, and then keep it. And I think that sort of extends throughout other aspects of your life. It builds a positive feedback loop for you. At least that's my mindset about it, and I feel like I do genuinely like trying out new things and learning new things in general, not just sort of in an academic setting or at the gym. you know. But it can be, just a random fact or subject that I will barrel down that rabbit hole, just find out more, and again, I feel like that also leads to massive amounts of imposter syndrome in what you do, because you'll get to a point, and despite everything that you've done on this random subject, random offset, you will eventually know more than other people in it, and then you're faced with that sort of that glaring fact that you know more, but you also don't think that you do. And you're going to be asking yourself, why the hell am I doing this? Why am I here? Why was I, chosen to do this, whatever? I guess that mostly goes down the job route and learning different skills, but I do still think that it applies. So I rarely feel like I am in the room that I belong in. And I've never thought that it's a good idea to be the smartest person in the room, but also on the complete polar opposite side, I feel like I'm very bottom sort of that totem pole. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, it is uncomfortable for sure, but I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing. Now if you ask me, if I knew what I was doing all of the time, I would say, and I feel like a lot of people would say no. I don't think that everyone has it fully together 100% of the time. The degree to which I'm winging it, though, I feel is pretty high up there, which, I mean, could be a completely personal thing, and everyone could feel that way. I suppose I wouldn't really know. But if we want to get, I suppose, to the root meaning, of life, the universe, and everything, I don't know much, but I do know what I don't know. And I'm not going to give my advice about this, since I don't feel like I actually have any hardened experience, to actually give you. But I will say that in my very long 26 years of experience, that was a joke. 26 is not very long at all. But I will say that I have experienced a lot of joy in pursuing things that I don't know a lot about, and allowing myself to feel like a beginner. I think that's really important in finding out who you are. At least it was for me, and still is for me. I will also say, I think love is a big part. The act of loving something or someone and being loved back has been so much comfort in a world full of uncomfortableness. All that comfort, it's a nice contrast to how uncomfortable everything else is, rather. And love definitely isn't always comfortable either. It's definitely not always comfortable, and no one really knows the rules of that, the rules of love. But it's one of the few things in life that is fully measured by effort. And I think that's really important. And that's, I guess, the end of my yap session, a little rant. I don't even know what this is. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. But I just want to sit down and, I guess, talk, have just a conversation. Nothing really planned. A nice little drink, Lagunitas. Hoppy refresher. 0 calories, 0 alcohol. So technically, it's kind of good for you, I think. Maybe the next rabbit hole I go down will be about nutrition. I'll be drinking carrot juice next time. But I guess till next time, I'll see you around.